Yeah, well, this is a challenge, really. Where next for the left in 15 minutes? So I'm not going to attempt to give all the answers, but I want to talk about three things. And the first thing I want to talk about is the potential of left unity and what I think the left unity with a big L and a big U, as distinct from revolutionary unity, which Simon's just talked about and where I agree with everything he said, I think. Left unity's shown its enormous potential since Ken Loach launched his appeal, with more than 8,000 people signing up for the appeal and over 100 local groups in the process of being set up. That doesn't mean that everything is signed, sealed and delivered. After all, I was involved in both the Socialist Alliance and after that in Respect. Both of them achieved some important things, notably with Respect being the first political organisation that really began to win sections, particularly amongst young sections of the Muslim community that had been radicalised in the anti-war movement, and then it went pear-shaped. So why do I think some of the reasons that left unity can be different? Well, much as I love and respect Ken Loach has no intention of playing the role in left unity that Galloway played in Respect. Left unity doesn't have a charismatic a leader. What we're committed to doing, I hope we do have a charismatic leadership, but what we're committed to doing is building a collective leadership that is based on discussions in the branches and collective work on the ground. We're also committed, and we've begun to have discussions within Left Unity about how we can ensure that organisation is a safe space for all the oppressed. There's no way that you can build a campaigning organisation that takes up the challenges of austerity and that poses an electoral challenge on the streets, an electoral challenge at the ballot box, unless that organisation is completely welcoming of and built by the people at the sharp end of austerity. That is women, that is black people, that is disabled people, that is LGBTQ people, and that's why central to what we're going to be doing is having discussions about how we can build ourselves as a safe space. That's why it was extremely positive that the first national meeting of Left Unity voted overwhelmingly to have reserved seats for women on the 10 national places. I think that's only a symbolic statement, but it is a good statement of intent, and we can go forward in that. There's been some discussion taking place among some of the revolutionaries involved in Left Unity about what our particular role as revolutionaries is in there. In my view, and in the view of socialist resistance, the most radical thing we can do as revolutionaries is to be putting our energies and our ideas into building the broadest possible organisation. Why do I say that? Because as revolutionaries, we are a tiny minority amongst the people who are committed and want to see an alternative kind of world. We're a tiny minority amongst the people who are furious at what this government is doing. It's not because I don't have confidence in revolutionary ideas, but I don't think it's very useful to always be sitting in rooms with people who agree with me. I think it's actually more useful to be campaigning on the streets, to be active in communities, working with people who may still have illusions that the trade union leaders can deliver it for us all, that maybe have only just left the Labour Party and haven't quite worked out exactly what's going on there. I've got confidence in the ideas that I hold, not only the ideas of feminism, the ideas of eco-socialism, the idea that democracy is central to everything that we do, and the idea that we need to build a fundamentally different system which meets the needs of the aspirations of the many and not the few. But I think I can fight for those ideas most effectively amongst people who are newly coming into politics, rather than just talking with people who already agree with most of what I'm saying, which I'm absolutely in favour of doing as well, but can't be the only thing that we do. The second thing I wanted to talk about is why I think the left needs to think and act more systematically and more energetically around the environmental crisis. It seems to me, and to socialist resistance, that climate change and the other aspects of the environmental crisis are things that we not ignore at our peril. At the most basic level, it will certainly be much harder, even if we succeed in mobilising for a socialist revolution, to construct societies which are based on need, not greed, when capitalism has degraded the planet itself so badly through desertification, the erosion of topsoils, rising sea levels, the massive depletion of biodiversity, and when the increasing patterns of extreme weather destroy communities' livelihoods and lives, the way that we saw with Hurricane Katrina and we've seen so many times since, the way that communities in the global south see on a daily basis. And all of these things are creating hundreds of thousands of climate refugees and posing challenges for our movement. It seems to me that the environmental movement poses challenges for the left. Challenges which call on us, as Frantz Fanon said, to stretch Marxist categories, which have some similarities to the challenges posed by the women's liberation movement. There are some differences as well, but I think that my feeling and my experience is that many comrades on the left respond in the same way to the way much of the left has responded to the challenge of feminism. That's being polite, but wishing the whole thing would really go away. In the same way that feminism has demanded that we look at reproduction as well as at production and how the two are interrelated, including to do so through the eyes of black women. The environmental movement asks, for example, should we accept what Marxists have argued going back to the Russian Revolution, that the peasantry is a class of the past? I'm not sure that's true. I'm not sure that if we look at the radicalism of organisations like La Via Campesina, the International Peasant Movement, with its national affiliates like the MST in Brazil, like the BKF in Bangladesh, whose work extends from the defence of the environment to the defence of workers' rights, and actually put campaigning against violence against women at the centre of their political activities. This sounds like an organisation with a reactionary agenda. I think that we need to rethink many of those old shibboleths. In November, Socialist Resistance will be bringing a comrade from Bangladesh, Comrade Badrul Alam, who's the president of the Bangladesh Krishna Federation, the biggest peasant organisation in Bangladesh based in rural communities. Originally, our plan for that tour was that it would focus overwhelmingly on the question of the climate crisis. And the project of organising a climate caravan, which will take place in 2015, going from Bangladesh through parts of India into Nepal. This follows on the very successful caravan that the comrades organised in Bangladesh itself in 2012, which allowed political discussion in hundreds of different rural communities throughout the country on the experience of climate change and how the communities could more effectively organise against this. But while this aspect will remain a central part of the tour, the disaster of Rana Plaza brought Bangladesh to our front pages and television screens. Badrul will describe the disastrous conditions that mainly women workers face in the sweatshops in Bangladesh. Women who've been forced to leave the countryside because climate change has made it impossible for many communities to continue to work the land because of salinification. I hate that word. And how they're resisting the impossible conditions that they're facing in the sweatshops of Dhaka and the surrounding areas through organising independent trade unions and militant demonstrations. Our Rana Plaza was not an isolated example, and I'd say that indeed it's not only a common experience in Bangladesh, where there was a horrible fire which killed hundreds of workers only a few months before the Rana Plaza disaster, but those death traps also exist extensively elsewhere in the Indian subcontinent, and I'm sure elsewhere in the global south, although personally I know more about the conditions in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh than I do in other countries. And what we can do in solidarity with those in both the countryside and in the cities. And I hope that other comrades here from other organisations and none would be interested in helping us to promote that and get involved in those discussions. Finally, in the third point that I wanted to make, I want to go back to some of the things China said in introducing the whole of this afternoon. And allow myself to have a drink of water. We need to change the way that we relate to each other and to the movement as a whole on the radical and revolutionary left. Political discussion, like political activity, needs to be premised on the basis that we all have things to learn as well as things to bring to the table. I think in practice, those of us that have stayed politically active over a sustained period of time, and one in which there's been many more downs than ups, know this at an individual level, otherwise we wouldn't have survived. But often our organisations don't act as if that was true. We need to understand that if we refuse to create or operate structures in which we can be held to account and act as if we are revolutionary messiahs, if we split or leave organisations if we can't control them, then the long-term effect, however many short-term gains we may win, will be to make people demoralised and burnt out, rejecting politics as a whole. In my political activity, which has been going on for more decades than I care to remember, I've seen thousands of people who've come into political activity full of hope and aspiration, who've ended up not being able to survive the world that we've created on the revolutionary left. And that's a complete, every loss is a waste in a situation where the boss's offensive is getting stronger. We can't afford to lose comrades by the wayside. We also need to find ways of having disagreements without demonising or not listening to our opponents. We invest a lot of time and energy and often a lot of our own identity in revolutionary politics, so it's not surprising we feel passionate about our beliefs. But that sense of commitment shouldn't lead us to dismiss, diminish or caricature what others say, let alone the contribution they can and are making to the struggle as a whole. Even when we think somebody is profoundly wrong on a particular question, this doesn't mean that everything they do or say is wrong, let alone that they're a useless person. And we're much more likely to convince others of our own ideas if we work alongside them, doing things together as well as discussing them. And in doing so, we may even adjust our own views as the complex reality of the world and the ways of achieving change become more obvious through our collective experiences. All of this means that we have to be committed to the greatest possible democracy in the movement as a whole and in our own organisations of the far left. We need to discuss and explore how best to do that. I think it's great that there's so much discussion over the last few months about new forms of organisation, new ways of doing things. It means that it shouldn't be an admission like that of guilt, that there are disagreements in our organisations, but those disagreements themselves should be seen as a sign of healthy discussion and comrades who are confident to develop their own ideas and articulate them, not wait to be told by somebody else what to think. If we don't learn from our comrades, if we don't learn from the movements that throw up new ways of organising or new reworkings of old ideas, which are hugely creative in their anger and in their positive creation, their positive determination to create something better, then we're missing the inspiration, we're missing the opportunities to really change for the better. I've been really fixated over the last fortnight with what's been happening in the streets and in the parks of Turkey. I think that every time the movement really moves forward, we can be inspired, but we have to learn from what comrades are telling us about what's actually going on, not seek to impose our straitjackets on a real living, breathing movement. Thank you, comrades.